Hi everybody, it's Andrea Ankrum with Indivisible, Northern Kentucky District 4. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Klatch Conversations with Candidates. This is where you get to know your candidate through a question and answer forum. And if you're watching live, we encourage you to send questions and we will get them to your candidate. So tonight's guest is Jeff Grammer. He's running for the House seat in District 36. Welcome,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and why you're running for office?
Hi, I'm Jeff Grammer, and I'm running for District 36, State House District 36. District 36 is the southeast corner of Jefferson County, and it has a little bit of a finger that goes up into Oldham County. There's about three precincts up in there, about maybe 200, 300 people in that area. It's the largest district within Metro Louisville, about 38,000 voters within that particular area. I'm running for this House district primarily because of the fact that we've kind of lost our sense of community. We need to go where you and I actually help each other, and we actually all benefit as a result.
Okay, that's great. So we're going to jump right into our questions.
Awesome.
And so the first thing that we're going to talk about is something that's really been in the forefront in Kentucky here recently, and that is the state employee pension issue.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are your thoughts on this issue? How should they be funded? And what is the future of the pension system in Kentucky? Do you agree with what the governor is proposing, these 401ks? Or if not, what do you propose for the pension system?
Well, first, let's be very clear about one thing. This is not, has not, and will never be a cost problem. It is not an expense issue. Mm-hmm. It's a revenue problem.
Right.
As a result, we need to go after and look at new revenue streams. Mm-hmm. There are 4 different ways we could actually even do that today. You could do things like expanded gaming, medical marijuana, tax reform, expanded hemp production. You do any 2 of those 4 issues, and or 2 of those 4 initiatives, we could do something like a 30-year revenue bond structure with about a 2.75% yield rate, and fund up to even 70% of the current unfunded liability. Those are the numbers.
Right, right. I mean, so you are in favor of keeping the pension system the way it is, not moving towards this 401k, which is unstable. And so it's more about finding the funding than restructuring and doing things that would change everything. Because the way the governor makes it sound like we're in a crisis, right? And he's looking at, we got to change it because we can't afford this. But it sounds like that you're proposing more revenue is the way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is part of the case, is that yes, it may be in crisis from the standpoint that there's $43 billion that's unfunded at this point, but that's not what actually we need to be addressing. We don't, again, it's not a cost issue. We got here not because the people drawing a pension didn't pay into it. Right. We got here because they were begging from Peter to pay Paul, as using a cliche. In other words, they were robbing a piece of that out to pay for other projects that they couldn't fund. So as a result, they didn't have the revenue streams to actually put back into it. Now we can fix that without actually cutting people's benefit structures. We have co-opted out to a far right-wing agenda about the fact that they're the only ones who have business solutions. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Right, right.
There are a lot of us who are actually progressives who have been very successful in business. We know how to actually do things like finance, administration, business types of things. We know how to do these things.
Right, right. Okay. So would you be in support of casino gambling as a new form of revenue?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was part of what I was just saying a minute ago from the expanded gaming techniques. That expanded gaming, from the numbers that I've seen, is worth anywhere from $50 to $150 million per year in terms of additional revenue streams.
Awesome. And do you feel like in order for us to retain teachers and recruit new teachers, that we need to keep the pension system the way that it is?
Oh, absolutely. And that's part, again, you cannot, we've made this contract with our teachers from the standpoint, remember, they cannot draw Social Security. So that is they don't have that other potential income when they retire. To get the best and brightest to come in and stay, you need to provide a benefit structure so that you can actually get them and retain them.
Right, right.
Hopefully we'll get into a piece of that later on.
So, Governor Bevin's budget would cut funds from public education, and House Bill 134 would give tax credits for private school tuition. This would take away public school tax money, and the state would lose revenue. What are your ideas to support funding of our public education? And maybe those are some things that you just talked about.
Right.
Not only for the pension, but supporting public education because they want to cut. And what are your thoughts on charter schools and tax credits for private school tuition?
Let's start with the key phrase that you just said there. You cannot cut your way to profitability, first and foremost. Every entrepreneur knows this. When it comes to education, education is the key to our future growth, both economically and provides our competitive advantages with that. When you start cutting out the foundation of how we actually grow our infrastructure or our overall economic infrastructure, you are selling out our future as a result. I mean, you just are. Some of those things we've just already talked about are ways to help fund that. We actually we don't have enough investment in public education.
Right.
We were just talking a few minutes ago how we are grossly lacking in adult education, people who have not even gotten their GEDs yet or their high school educations. There's a large segment, about anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000 people per year that are being left behind. When you do that, we don't have enough educational workforces to actually keep them gainfully employed. We need to put more into that.
Right. So what about charter schools? How do you feel about those?
Let me see if I can say this without being too vindictive. This is absolutely nothing more than a money grab. There is no empirical evidence that suggests that any charter school implementation has ever resulted in better educational outcomes. At best, I've seen somewhere between 1% and 2%, which is not enough to recall this. This is a money grab because they see money flowing through that they could then pull away and use for some sort of other type of income to support whatever private industry they want.
Right. So if you were elected, would you support getting rid of charter schools? I mean, it sounds like they're going to try to implement this now. Like
yeah. I don't have any doubt that at least in the Jefferson County areas, for sure, what has been done just since last Saturday has been unreal. Basically, the governor now has complete control of the board. He has appointed someone who is a charter school supporter, and within the Jefferson County system, they've already kind of announced the fact that they are looking at possibly targeting for 2019. This, again, this is nothing more than a way for them to grab money and actually use public funding for some sort of private endeavor.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about higher education costs because they're skyrocketing, right? The average college student ends up tens of thousands of dollars in debt upon graduating from college. Do you have any solutions for this crisis, and how can the Kentucky government support our students in their pursuit of higher education?
This is actually one of the number one reasons I actually kind of got into this to begin with. When you ask anyone under the age of 40 what their number one issue is, it's going to be student loan debt.
Right.
When you ask any company what their top 5 issues are, one of those 5 issues somewhere is going to be finding and retaining the best talent. Student loan debt is crushing a lot of our best and brightest talent. What we need to be doing, since we just gave a $1 trillion tax cut to companies so they no longer need tax incentives for capital expenditures. What we need to be doing is taking those tax incentives, putting them as employee benefit pass-through packages for doing such things as paying down student loan debt, providing in-company child care. Those are perks and benefits to keep the best and brightest in our state, and actually becomes an economic attractor for other types of companies to look at us. Amazon's HQ2 could have really been if we had already had that kind of structure in place, we might have been a real competitor. We aren't right now.
Right. So how would the Kentucky government kind of force those companies? Is there a way to force them to look at those things, or is that just something that they need to do themselves? Because it doesn't seem like those are things that they are willing to do at this point.
You're talking about the
companies like paying down the student, doing more to retain the workers, because it seems like they would be doing that already if it was something that was beneficial.
Some companies actually do that. Some actually provide, you see a lot of companies that provide continuing education credits and paying for like tuition assistance,
Tuition reimbursement, yes.
tuition assistance, those type of things. But that's not really addressing the bigger issue.
Right.
The bigger issue is the debt problem that's associated.
Right.
And private industry has a way of compensating people much better than the public sector does, for sure. But we can do this because if government does this, if we do that, what that does is it provides us, again, a way of keeping the best and brightest within our state, expands the middle class in general in terms of those higher paying jobs, and becomes an economic attractor for additional companies to come into this area, which again builds and grows our overall economy.
Right. So would you offer tax credits or tax breaks to companies that would offer those types of programs, or how would you incentivize them?
Tax incentives work as direct pass-throughs. So in other words, there are two different types of tax incentives. Or you can use tax breaks, like basically a tax cut, where someone comes in and says, okay, if you invest in our environment, we'll give you a break of about 5 or 10%, whatever that percentage number is. The other one is actually what's called a revenue tax incentive, where it's actually money paid to a company for a specific type of endeavor. Most often that is done as a capital expenditure of equipment. For example, what the governor did with that Ashland aluminum plant. You really don't want to go down this little rabbit hole with me either, because that is the worst deal I've ever seen. I will be surprised if that plant actually ever opens.
Okay.
I certainly will be surprised if it's here past 2020, the way that deal is structured. But the other, again, just going back to the fact that those tax incentives can be tied directly into a company's pass-through cost structure. So they can say, okay, look, it's for a specific reason. You take that money and it's applied for this reason. So you can do it that way.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about marijuana.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on making medical marijuana legal, recreational marijuana legal, and bringing back the hemp industry? Would you support any of these?
All three.
All three?
All three. We should at least have a discussion about recreational marijuana. Let's get into that in just a second. But medical marijuana specifically, we really need to do this as soon as we possibly can for two different reasons. One, it does actually provide in at least California, Colorado, and New York, the opioid death rate decreased 25% when they implemented medical marijuana. Two, it provides, at least from the numbers I've put together, anywhere from 30 to, well, Nevada just implemented medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, and in the first 6 months made $30 million. First 6 months.
I could fund our pensions.
Yeah,
some of it.
Yeah. So that's $60 million per year, and by at least one tax incentive study I saw, that entire market is worth about $620 million. So we really need to do that, because that is an additional revenue stream to bring in. Both of those from that standpoint. The increased hemp production can be done in two different ways. One, it provides us an additional revenue stream from the standpoint that we can use it for things like biodiesel and CBD. CBD is another potential for an export out of this state to even abroad, which is its growth rate internationally is about a 20% growth rate right now for CBD.
What's CBD?
Cannabinoid oil.
Okay.
Somebody out there online is going to correct me on that name. I guarantee you. So I've gotten that wrong, I'm sure.
I haven't heard about that before. So,
yeah.
Okay.
But it's used in a different, a lot. Since we don't have medical marijuana, a lot of people who have things like Lyme disease, they will use that as a way to help alleviate some of the symptoms they have. Again, this is part of the reason that why we need medical marijuana as well.
Right.
And we should at least have a discussion about recreational marijuana use. There's real big money to be made in that. I mean, we're talking about on scope, somewhere about 25 to 40% higher returns of revenue than we can even get with any of those two of those other three. There's some real money to be made there from a revenue
Do you think that would have to go to a vote from the people?
Yeah, I think we should do it that way.
Because I know they've done that in other states where they've
Yeah.
put it on the ballot. So.
Right. Yeah, we should do it that way.
And what about, if that doesn't pass or any of these, what about just growing it for export? I mean, that's an option as well?
It is. Although here's the problem with growing it for export. In Oregon, they have actually overgrown their market space right now, where the growers that were put in place have produced so much that they cannot make up for the actual the over sales rate. So we'd have to kind of look at the actual amount that we would produce in place, because otherwise, this is a matter of a business perspective. If you overproduce, then you're going to get less returns on sales.
Right.
And by the way, those out there who are economic and finance majors, that's that failure of the Laffer curve. You guys know what I'm talking about.
I don't.
It's let's put it this way: it's the failure of Reaganomics.
Okay, there, I understand that. Okay, so going into the opioid crisis, there's multiple factors involved: big pharma, physicians overprescribing, and the need for alternative pain medications.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts and ideas for combating this epidemic in Kentucky?
Well, primarily, there has been some good plans from a standpoint of probably increasing the tax structure on opioid epidemic and applying that to drug treatment programs.
So taxing the drugs.
The drugs themselves. And again, we just mentioned a few minutes ago about the fact that using medical marijuana allows those people who do have severe opioid addictions. It is a treatment. It is not a cure to help them then get off of those opioid addictions.
So what would you do anything to try to regulate big pharma? I think, if they just keep pushing, or these physicians that are overprescribing, would you do anything as part of the legislature that would kind of
We need to look at that. I don't know exactly right now. I don't have in my head right now exactly what I want to do with that, but it is something that we need to study to determine what we need to do with that.
Okay. Moving on we're going back to the economy. Some of the unemployment numbers in Kentucky are due to the lack of skilled workers. We talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
Here in northern Kentucky, our economy is booming. How do we ensure that we have enough skilled workers in this area to support our growing economy?
Let's see. There's education, and wait, did I say education? We are not investing enough in our future. That's really part of it. Again, several of the things we've already talked about so far, using tax incentives as employee benefit pass-through programs to actually be an economic attractor, making sure that we are actually training and investing in our educational system to make sure we have those high-skilled workers here, retaining those, retaining the best and brightest here, letting them hear that the companies are coming into here, they're not leaving here for those high-paid, what I call basically professional working class type of jobs. Those are those jobs between 70 to 120K that are post-secondary education type of jobs that have people that are nurses, teachers, computer programmers. Those type of jobs are the ones that are the fastest growing, and we need to make sure that we have well-trained staff for that. And unless we put in more investment in education, we're not going to have those.
What about the displaced workers, the people who've lost their jobs and now they're trying to find a new skill? Yeah.
Well, again, that's part of that thing we were talking about a minute ago about adult education. Earlier, I think, you and I were actually talking offline about the fact that in between 2014 and 2015, we had 7,000 people get their GED. Between 2015 and 2016, they changed the test structure to be more in line with what's being taught at the high school level. When they did that, they also increased the cost structure to it. We went from having 7,000 people get their GED down to just 1,700. That is, so we have a huge now skill gap, and we are failing a lot of our constituents, a lot of Kentuckians here in this state by not having a way to educate them and make sure that they've got the skill sets they need for these other types of jobs. And again, if we're bringing in other types of skill higher paying jobs, things like solar industries, looking at research for algae biodiesel, increased hemp production for biodiesel production, other types of things like that, we can then retrain those individuals.
Through government programs?
Or other types of post-secondary education programs.
What about technical or vocational schools at the high schools? Do you support those?
Yeah, those. In fact, I went to a technical school for bricklaying. Those are one of those things. Yeah.
Right.
Those type of skill sets are vital as to build the other infrastructure that we need. In Jefferson County, for example, one of the things I've talked about before is that in Jefferson County, like Northern Kentucky, Lexington, and Louisville are the three largest economic engine drivers of this state. Those three combined are pretty much 90% of the overall economic value of what Kentucky is. In Jefferson County, in Metro Louisville, we only get back 40 to 45 cents for every dollar that we send to Frankfurt. And yet we have a huge problem with overcrowded roads. We don't have enough infrastructure spending there. We have areas, especially in District 36, which don't even have sewers or high-speed internet. Believe it or not, yes, in that district, in Louisville Metro, there's areas within my district that do not even have high-speed internet access yet. In those areas, so unless we train people who can actually work and build on roads, we're not going to have the workforce that we need to do it.
So would you support more of these vocational schools at high schools around the Commonwealth?
Yeah,
because they're kind of spread out far and few between. So.
Okay, I didn't know how, because again, my view of that piece of it is just pretty much very geographically located, just within Jefferson County. So I didn't know what the dispersion rate was, but yeah, we would need to actually put those in place for the different areas.
Okay, so we're going to talk about right to work because Kentucky is now a right to work state, and we know
really,
that
I never thought that was a valid phrase, but
I know it's yeah. It makes you think that it's a good thing, but in reality we know that it's anti-union.
It is.
It reduces the ability of the unions to collective bargain. What are your thoughts on Kentucky being a right to work state? And if you're elected, what would you do about this?
Well, the first thing we would do is we need to repeal that. There's one thing you need to know real quick. My view on unions is this. It is maybe not necessarily in the technical definition of the Constitution, but it's certainly within the spirit of the Constitution that you deserve representation, not just in government, but even in your workplace. It is a constitutional right, in my opinion, to have representation at every level. With that said, also, unions protect children. I don't forget history easily, and in 1935, it was unions that actually provided the first piece of legislation sponsored by and backed by them to get in place to protect for child protection, child workplace protections. That's all I really need to know to be able to support unions, right there. We are going to repeal right to work because there's no need for it. There is no need to even have it in place. So we can get rid of that and still be as competitive as before.
Okay, great. So what about minimum wage? There was Senate Bill 17 would increase the minimum wage for many workers to $10 per hour by 2020. Do you support this, and do you think it's enough?
I'm sorry, say that last part again. What was it?
Do you, the $10, so $10 an hour by 2020, do you support that, raising the minimum wage?
Yeah,
and do you think that that's even enough?
It's really not. Actually, we do need to raise the minimum wage, but we need to do it in a graduated and weighted average way, primarily because of the fact that what is a living wage and a viable minimum wage in, like, for example, Louisville, Lexington, or even here in northern Kentucky, may not be the same as what's in, like, Winchester or Hazard.
Right.
Because you've got so you need to make sure that we've got that weighted and graded properly, because it may not be a valid number otherwise.
So how would you support small businesses who might have a problem with this versus Walmart, who shouldn't have a problem raising the minimum wage, but the small businesses might have some issue with raising the minimum wage?
Well, again, that's you have to look at that from a weighted and graded wage level. If small businesses also have the other advantages that we can put in play, we could give them an additional small little tax incentive for that. And say, okay, look, we're going to raise the minimum wage, like, for example, within Metro Louisville. And to be competitive in that area, then we can actually take even local taxes and say, okay, we'll give you an extra 2% off of that.
Okay. So some of the tax reform that's been suggested by Frankfurt are cutting taxes for the wealthiest Kentuckians and then shifting some of the tax burden to lower income people making less than $21,000 a year. What are your ideas for a comprehensive tax modernization program instead of what's currently being discussed?
The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, KCEP, actually has a really good white paper on tax reform. There are most of it I actually do agree with. Some pieces of it I don't. But you look in there, and that's a really good template for how to do tax reform. Using most of what's in there, we can actually do a whole lot of tax reform without doing what they said there. I'm actually not against corporate tax cuts, but as progressives, one of the things we've missed the boat on is that we've co-opted out that argument that that the far right wing only has their
the experts
in business type of things. One of the things we should have done is grab a mic immediately when they came out with their tax plan and say, okay, fine, you want to give a company a 5% corporate tax rate? I'll see you one better. We'll do that. We'll give an additional 5% to any company that's has union membership.
Or that supports our education programs or our technical programs.
Right. We can do that. We can do those things and push those in play.
So it sounds like we need to, if we're going to give them these incentives, we need to get something.
Right.
We can't just give them and expect them to do the right thing.
No, exactly. We can't. This is the art of negotiation. The true art of negotiation.
True art of the deal. Yeah.
Is that when you put something on the table, you really need to get back something for it.
Right.
That's what has been lacking.
Great. Okay. So there was a House Bill 372. It was an anti-marriage equality bill, which would allow social service and housing discrimination against same-sex married couples. If you are elected, what would you do to ensure that Kentucky does not discriminate against anyone, regardless of race, religion, or sexual orientation?
It's really sad that in this day and age we're even having these discussions. It really is.
I know.
It's actually sad. We need to make sure that everyone, LGBTQs, race, religion, has protection under the law to live their lives and as part of the U.S. Constitution. That is guaranteed in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, 100%. And it's sad that we have to have laws to do that. Unfortunately, we need to.
So you would be in favor of introducing legislation that would totally make
yes.
equality happen. Okay. So we're going to talk about reproductive rights. There's many bills being presented in the legislature now that would limit women's reproductive health rights. We feel like we're under attack a lot of times. Even here so we have a health system here in northern Kentucky. It's called St. Elizabeth, and they're basically taking over everything.
I know. Actually, believe it or not, they're actually using a piece of software that I have a copyright to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We get it that way.
Okay. But they won't perform some procedures such as tubal ligation because of their Catholic beliefs. How would you support women's reproductive health rights here in Kentucky?
Let's be politically incorrect here for a second. Most of this is being driven by a bunch of white men, and women are the ones that need to decide what is going on with their own bodies, from just health care as well as just in general with their overall health and well-being. And the other piece of that, though, and one of the things that's key with me, and people don't talk about it enough, I don't think, is economic equality and opportunity. In this state, women still only make about 80 cents to every dollar out there. We need to have the type of laws like what goes on in Iceland, which they don't actually penalize companies that don't pay women equally. They basically shame them. Is what they do.
How do they do that?
It's a $500 fine if they put in place a law which says, okay, look, you know what, you need to prove that you're paying women equally. If you do not do that, we're going to fine you $500. But more than that, we are going to publicly put on display and let everyone know that you are not paying your women equally in the workplace. We need to do that. And when we get true economic equality for women, you will have your power that you need to control your own destiny.
And I could see that too, because if you know that this company does not pay women equally, well, I'm not going to. Why would I work there?
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Why would you? I wouldn't work there.
So, what would you do for these reproductive health rights? Like, Planned Parenthood is under attack. There's
oh yeah.
Things like that. Would you try to introduce legislation that would support more of these women's health clinics that support reproductive rights?
I would absolutely 100% support it. I think it needs to be driven by women. I will support whatever a woman coalition comes up with and a women convention decides. I'm going to support that.
Okay.
You need to tell me what we need to do.
Okay.
I'm not going to make a decision for women about your health.
Okay. So if you get elected, women out there, talk to him, right? He will help. Great. Okay. House Bill 227 was an anti-solar bill. It would reward monopoly utility companies and punish consumers. If passed, it would put rooftop solar out of reach for most Kentuckians. Kentucky needs to keep up with the rest of the country in terms of clean, green energy. What would you do to help protect and promote the use of clean energy?
Yeah, I kind of went a little bit ballistic on that bill. Primarily because of the fact that one of the major sponsors of that was right down here the road at Grant County. This is an individual who, when he sponsored this bill, he said that his constituents were tired of financially supporting Louisville and Lexington. Now, I'm not sure how his constituents are paying for us when he has $65 million of funded road construction going on. Now, the top 5 programs from the Kentucky Department of Transportation, 4 of them are in Jefferson County, 3 of them are in my district. None of them are funded. So yeah, they've kind of gone after that. Plus, on top of that, most of the people in my district, within District 36, really support and want solar panel installations.
Right.
Primarily because we have 2 of the most beautiful natural parks in Jefferson County. It's still within the Fisherville area. It's Beckley Creek and the Parklands area, Floydsport Park. Those need to be protected at pretty much at any cost, really. Because we've got unplanned development going on in those areas with that. I'm so glad that HB 227 was actually defeated.
Right.
And that's something we need to make sure would be everywhere else. That was gone. That was not here. But we actually need to develop more of that type of infrastructure. And again, that's another one that we could actually use tax incentives to actually support and promote, to put in place.
Great. Okay, so we're going to talk about guns. Should Kentucky have stricter gun ownership laws, and do you think assault rifles should be banned? Because there's a lot of push for that around the country.
Yeah, there is a lot of push for that around the country. I'm just going to get my notes because I didn't get through this the other night when we actually went. We had a forum the other night, and I didn't get through the 5 points I wanted to make about this. So I just want to see if I can do it now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Awesome. With that, the number one issue that we have here is. With that is yes, I would support raising the age limit to actually even purchase a weapon. To get to that, we should be, banning assault weapons, but that really needs to be done at a federal level. One of the things we can do, let's just get to the low hanging fruit of all this. If we can agree to do such that we all agree that, let's say it's at least in part a mental health issue, then let's do this. Let's put a 1% sales tax on all guns and ammunition within the state, and fully fund all mental health and gun safety programs, and tie it where it can't be used for anything else.
Right.
Because the current mental health situation that we have in here, the current facilities, cannot even support the people that need to be serviced right now. So we need to make sure we're fully funding that.
Right.
Let's put in GVROs, which are gun violence restraining orders. Are you familiar with those?
I know, like, if you're a domestic violence case, that possibly you shouldn't. They take your guns away. I don't know exactly.
It's not just domestic violence. If you are deemed a threat by either a healthcare or even a law enforcement official, they can then confiscate your guns at some point And at some point you might be able to get them back, but not immediately. So that until you are no longer a threat to yourself or others.
Do we have that in Kentucky?
We do not. We need those.
Yeah.
Again, this is low-hanging fruit kind of
Right.
stuff that we need to be put
Right.
in place. Increasing background checks during and closing those particular type of loopholes. The other piece of this, for example, is to do such things as we've got a lot of our healthcare people right now are not allowed today to actually ask someone if they have a weapon in their home, and while they're doing an assessment of whether or not they could be a harm to themselves or others.
Right.
Our law enforcement agencies and our healthcare agencies are not allowed to share, or actually, even if they were allowed to share information between all the different ones about what's going on, though there's even a database problem between all of them, and they technically can't share that information. So we can't even share information between all the different agencies within the state right now.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you feel about people who do own guns and they don't have them locked up appropriately, and then their children end up getting them and harming themselves or each other? Would you implement any rules around stricter, rules around handling of guns, I guess is the thing, because we see this all the time where the
Right.
kids get the guns,
Right.
and then because they're just laying around.
They're just laying
I mean,
around.
how do we address that problem?
Well, a minute ago I was talking about the fact about putting a sales tax in to fully support gun safety programs. That's one avenue.
Okay.
The only problem with putting in legislation in terms of like at the home level is how do we enforce that? I'm not sure I have an answer for that, frankly.
Yeah.
If we can put in place the law, but how do we enforce it? And that's the piece I'm not clear on just yet on how to deal with.
What do you think about arming teachers in public schools? Do you
Worst
have,
idea ever.
Do you have some alternative ideas?
We need to. Every school is going to be slightly different. What we need to do is ask the teachers and the administrators, and more importantly, the students, what is it that's going to make them feel safe? We can put in place measures of certain things, but if we do that on a global level, how do we make sure that, or do those people feel safe? What kids should only be worried about whether or not they're going to pass their test tomorrow, not whether or not they're going to be shot.
Right.
And we need to make sure that they've actually had input to say, well, this is what's going to make me feel safe.
Well, it's like my son who goes to high school. He actually wants the teachers to have guns because he feels like that's going to make him feel safe. And I'm trying to tell him I don't think that's the right thing, but that to him is the only solution. And I'm like, I don't want you to feel that way. I want there to be some alternatives because I feel like that's really dangerous. So
I think so as well, because in unfortunately an active shooter situation, teachers are the first responders. They're the ones that are the protectors of the children in place. They need to be worried about their safety immediately, not going out and playing law enforcement officer.
Right.
That's not their role.
Right.
But they need to be. But we need to make sure that we've had the students' input into this.
And so, would you support legislation that would provide funding to schools that need to kind of beef up their security?
Yeah.
Because some schools you can just walk right into now, and maybe have like a standardized, at least a certain level of security across schools.
Absolutely. And along with that, we need to make sure that those measures are tested and followed up through over time,
Checked.
and check and
Checked
balance.
on.
And have checks and balances with those as well.
Right. Okay. So what would you do to protect voting rights and protect against gerrymandering? Because that seems to be a problem here in Kentucky.
Honestly, until we get to where I think I think Morgan McGarvey told me that here in the state of Kentucky, we do redistricting in the years of twos. So in other words, it would be 2022 before we actually do redistricting, I think. Don't quote me on that. I know we do it every 10 years.
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years. But what we need to get away from the system where the party in power or the people in power are the ones to decide this. This needs to be done by a third-party, nonpartisan situation, and have them determine what the district lines are. District 36, by the way, is not only the largest House district within Jefferson County, it probably should be carved up into probably two just because of the size of it.
So there are some software programs that
Yeah.
do look at the districts. Would you be in favor of doing something like that?
Of course, I'm a geek.
I knew you'd say yes to that one. Okay, so how would you support our small businesses and farmers here in Kentucky?
Well, for define small businesses and farmers, they're kind of two different distinct things.
So maybe you could do one and the other.
Yeah, because I come from a, of course, in Metro Jefferson County, the small businesses have a different function. They're more service-oriented as opposed to agricultural. Now, the farmers in Kentucky, I think, again, if we're putting much more resource, much more investment into things like expanded hemp production as opposed to possibly even tobacco production, if we start shifting that in, that's going to bring in different revenue streams for them as well. For small businesses, we need to look at increasing the overall expanded base. Again, if we're growing our economy, if we're bringing in other companies, that provides greater opportunities for them, and that's how you can actually grow their bottom line base revenue streams.
Okay, what are your thoughts on criminal justice reform? Seems like we're trying to go towards a for-profit prison system and things that don't really work towards rehabilitation and trying to get people out of prisons.
Yeah, that's always the answer, right? Let's just lock everybody up.
And keep them coming back.
And keep them coming back, yeah. Because we want recidivism. Yeah,
Right.
No, a for-profit system is nothing more than a burn and churn. That's they get money by having the greatest amount of population in there. So they want that other type of thing. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Every other country in the world has a prison system in which they bring people in, evaluate them, give them different types of skills, and teach them even soft skills, even such things as just basic business skills from the standpoint of like, here's what you say, here's how you dress. Give them those type of soft skills even, and help them learn to get back into society in a way that is productive for them.
Let's talk a little bit about health care and Medicaid, because we're having some changes to Medicaid right now. We're putting in these possible work requirements to Medicaid. What do you think about what the governor's doing to the Medicaid program here in Kentucky?
He's completely dismantling our Medicaid. Medicaid protects some of the people, the most at risk parts of our population, the poor, the elderly, and even those who are children. And without those constructs, we are not able to actually provide for their needs, and that actually drives up the cost for all of us.
Right.
That's the problem. That's the problem that people seem to think, especially for a far right-wing agenda, is that, well, if we just cut this out, they'll stop being like welfare moms. Well, you know what? The problem is that drives the cost for everybody up.
Right.
If we provide for what I would love to see, obviously, is universal health care. I want to see that for all. But if we can't get there, then if we can at least provide making sure that everyone has basic health care provisions, then all of us benefit from this.
And how would you see that happen?
Well, we need to expand Medicaid as far as we can.
So instead of cutting it, we would like to expand
expand it and put more into it.
And so going back to health care, that the costs are skyrocketing now. And so, some states have gone ahead of and gone to a universal health care type system. I think Massachusetts maybe is one of them.
Massachusetts is the model.
Yeah. Do you see something like that happening here in Kentucky? Or what are the obstacles or the barriers?
The obstacles are many on many different fronts. Unfortunately, I don't know that we would ever get there in possibly not even my lifetime. It's something we need to work toward. I think part of the biggest problem is that there's a misconception about why universal health care is bad.
Right.
And there's an educational process that's going to have to occur to make this happen. We need to make sure that we're very fully communicating why that the rising cost of health care is tied to the fact that we don't have it universally applied.
So do you think that the health insurance companies. I mean, it's a for-profit business. How can we kind of take them out of the equation and get it back to healthcare for people? And we're not paying these companies to make a profit off of our healthcare.
That is such a loaded question. I'm not even sure we can answer that within 5 minutes, or even 5 years. We've got because it doesn't make any sense to me why you would have a for-profit healthcare system to take advantage of individuals who need proper care.
Right.
That entire system is just wrong and horribly broken. How we fix that is not going to be an easy fix. It's because you have to dismantle our entire way of thinking to get there.
Right. Well, before the 1970s, it was They couldn't. It wasn't for profit. That's how it used to be,
right.
And now it was changed.
It was changed.
So it seems like we could go back to that.
We could, but from 1970s to now, that's 40 years of ingrained
these companies and all their money
that's been put applied. So it's going to be really difficult to unwind that. It's not impossible, but it is going to be lengthy, and it's going to be a long, protracted endeavor to get there.
Right, and I think, and maybe part of the strategy is, like you say, is to educate people on why
it's
a universal healthcare system is good, and because I think there's a lot of people have this negative connotation about it because I don't want to pay for somebody else's health insurance, but you are anyways. I mean, we're all paying for everybody's,
and that's part of the misconception that comes into play is that, well, I don't want to pay for somebody else's. Well, you're paying for your own, and you're having to pay more because of the way it's set up today. It's going to be a long, protracted effort. I mean, that's the only way I can say it.
But I think we have to start.
But we have to start, and we have to, and these discussions are part of it, making sure that people are hear what we're saying about the fact that, look, a universal health care system really is the way to go. I think we will eventually get there. Part of the reason for that, why I think we'll eventually get there, is that when you look at, by the way, I absolutely adore millennials. They're wonderful. When you look at how they view the world, they even look at not just a universal healthcare system as a realistic, real situation that will happen, but also a provided benefit of salary.
Right.
In other words, there would be a particular amount of sum of money that you would be receiving over time, just as part of being a citizen of the United States.
Right. Okay. So that's all the questions that we have. We got through everything. So if you want to take a couple minutes, just talk to our audience again and, convince them why they should vote for you on May 22nd. I think you've done a good job of answering the questions and
thank you.
Stating your opinion.
Well, again, we all live together in a community, and I would really like to make sure that we are bringing back to our community that sense of community where we actually have that shared common bond, and that common bond is about the fact that once we are needing to grow and expand our communities, provide better opportunities for all, and making sure that we're actually putting in place that a legacy that we will leave, not just for our children, not just for our grandchildren, but for generations to come who we will never see. We're kind of at that crossroads right now. Or for lack of a better metaphor, we're sitting on a precipice, and we need to make sure we're going to the right direction and grow our communities in a better way.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. And everybody, you can watch this again on either our Facebook page or our YouTube channel page as well, and join us again next time for another conversation with the candidates. Thanks.